Well, hello. Welcome aboard. Welcome to our stream today. We got a ton of brand new Marvel Comics news announcements still left to talk about that are going to be a ton of fun this Sunday morning here. We actually have a brand new team of Illuminati to cover. This is really exciting. The Illuminati, the movers and shakers of the Marvel Universe, and in a brand new Thanos comic, it looks like there's elements of the Marvel Universe that are rearranging in specific ways. So we're really set to enter a new phase of Thanos and some of his plans. Very excited to go ahead and check out this news announcement in addition to all the other things we have in store today. The next phase of DC Comics and Dawn of DC is also well underway here. There's so many things to be excited about. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. My name is Arakko Braddock, and I want to officially welcome you over to our stream today. As mentioned up top, we're going to go ahead and dive deep into the brand new Illuminati. We're going to see what's in store for this new Thanos comic book. Elsewhere, we're also going to be discussing the Red Goblin. Very excited to see what's in store for that. We're going to hop into our news announcements in just a few moments here. Let's see here. Perfect. So without further ado here, let's go ahead and kick off our stream by diving into this brand new Thanos story that we've talked so much about here over in the Marvel Universe. Thanos is finally looking to return from a long absence by heading over to the city of Fresno, interestingly enough. Thanos' plans are to trap Fresno in an energy beam and raise it into the sky. What his plans are at the moment are unclear. However, it looks like Thanos wasn't able to pull off his scheme without being apprehended by a group of the brand new Illuminati. Without further ado here, let's go ahead and jump into this brand new Thanos comic book series that just recently came out here. Let's go ahead and dive into some spoilers featuring this brand new roster of Illuminati characters. This article is coming in over from Newsarama, written by George Marston. Thanos #1 debuts a new Illuminati, Marvel's superhero secret society. There's a new Illuminati lurking in the Marvel Universe. It takes some serious firepower to take on Thanos the Mad Titan, but in November 8th, Thanos #1, a new incarnation of one of the most secretive and powerful super teams in the Marvel Universe, has reared its head with some interesting new members. So I have to say here, one of the reasons why I'm so fond currently of the Illuminati is because of the new Avengers lead up over to Secret Wars way back in 2015. I'm really curious to see if this upcoming Thanos comic book is going to kind of build up to a much bigger Thanos story coming in the near future from Marvel. We're talking, of course, about the Illuminati, the Marvel Universe's superhero secret society, who come together to face down threats and challenges that are too powerful and monumental for even a team like the Avengers to handle. I know we've mentioned this already here, but there are going to be some spoilers over in our Thanos discussion, just so that we can talk about this with the depth it deserves here. Grayson Red, welcome aboard to our stream today. Reed loves himself some Illuminati law. Indeed. Really like the new roster of the Illuminati, featuring some new additions here with people like Emma Frost as well as Blue Marvel. And I think one of the aspects about this Illuminati team that's so interesting right now too is because right now Tony Stark and Emma Frost are actually in a relationship within the pages of the Iron Man and X-Men comic books. So extending that X-Men plot thread over to a Thanos comic book, I think, is really subversive and an interesting way to continue that plot thread over in a different comic book. Thanos #1 is written by Christopher Cantwell, featuring art from Luca Pizzari. We have colors from Ruth Redmond and letters from Corey Petit. And this issue primarily deals with the Mad Titan's return to Earth in search of a young woman named Roberta Marshall with a strange connection to his past. And I know we did mention this in a little bit of detail yesterday, but I actually did want to go ahead and cover this issue in a lot more depth. But I was stunned by how little sort of characterization and plot was portrayed throughout this issue. I think there's some really wonderful artwork from Luca Pizzari, but on the whole here, I thought that there was going to be more plot over in this Thanos issue. We're really introduced to the character of Roberta Marshall, and then the issue just constantly teases that there's some sort of connection over between Thanos and Roberta, but the issue is not yet ready to reveal its entire hand yet. So right now, I feel like there's just so much mystery in terms of this Thanos comic book. We won't spoil all the details, but in the course of this issue, Thanos launches a massive attack on the city of Fresno, California, in pursuit of his quarry. But Roberta isn't alone as she hides from Thanos, as a new Illuminati steps in to protect her from the villain and to help her understand her connection to him. That's right, we did have the Illuminati come in and finally shed some light towards the end of the issue here, but most of this Thanos comic book is spent with the character of Roberta Marshall. The new Illuminati revealed in Thanos #1 brings in some new members to the group who don't actually name themselves as the Illuminati in the story, but who are officially identified as such in the solicitation for the issue. The new roster includes Tony Stark, Reed Richards, Emma Frost, Doctor Strange, and Blue Marvel. A somewhat smaller Illuminati than what has previously come together, and it lacks mainstays like Namor and Black Bolt. In fact, there's no Inhuman representative at all. And I think that's another interesting aspect of this Illuminati too, is the fact that this Illuminati definitely reflects Marvel's current publishing plans, and Marvel I don't think has anything in store for the Inhumans title as a whole. The original Illuminati consisted of Professor X, Namor, Reed Richards, Tony Stark, Doctor Strange, and Black Bolt. Over the years, other heroes who have been inducted include Black Panther, Beast, Medusa of the Inhumans, and even Captain America. We'll see more of the new Illuminati when Thanos 2 arrives on January 3rd. Interestingly enough, that issue will pit Thanos against the Hulk, who's being billed as the Illuminati's secret weapon. Hulk allying with the Illuminati is an unlikely team-up, since the Illuminati are the ones who banished Hulk to space, leading to the landmark Planet Hulk story, which was adapted in the MCU in Thor Ragnarok, and the later event story World War Hulk, in which Hulk nearly takes down the entire Illuminati. I am really interested to see how this Thanos book starts to develop over time. I am really hoping that in subsequent issues, Christopher Cantwell really kind of puts the narrative into hyperdrive here. I really want to see the Illuminati go toe-to-toe against Thanos, and to see what other sort of connection Roberta Marshall has in store with the Illuminati and with Thanos. I definitely don't think that this first issue of Thanos tapped into the full potential of what the publisher has in store for the character, and I really hope that in kind of future issues here we'll see some additional characterization, some way for Cantwell and Pizzari to really make their mark on the Mad Titan here. I'm also interested if this title is going to lead into any upcoming storylines as far as Marvel goes. It feels like the Illuminati is just such a climactic team of Marvel heroes, and when they show up, there's some big implications over for the Marvel Universe. I cannot wait to see what this book has in store, and I'm really hoping that future issues are able to evoke an even stronger quality than what we've seen over in this issue. Before we head over to our next story too, I just want to say that in terms of the visuals here, I think Luca Pizzari's really expressive line adds a more subversive visual element than what you'd see with a Marvel artist more aligned towards their house style, and I think that really interesting line makes this comic book feel a little bit more unique than your average Thanos comic book series. All right, well, that was our deep dive into Thanos #1. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed our look at the brand new Illuminati. We've had a disturbing lack of coverage involved regarding the Marvels, the movie over in the Marvel Cinematic Universe featuring Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, and Monica Rambeau. let's go ahead and talk about, and even though I haven't seen the movie, let's go ahead and talk about Captain Marvel co-creator Kelly Sue DeConnick and why she wasn't credited over in the section for comic creators. Also, if anybody in the chat has seen the Marvels, I'm definitely curious to know what some of your thoughts are on the movie as well. Nobody Except Me, good morning, afternoon, great stream as always. Thanks for being here, Nobody Except Me, really appreciate it. All right, and let's go ahead and learn why Kelly Sue DeConnick wasn't thanked in the special credits section over for the Marvels, and it's definitely not as climactic or dramatic as you'd think here. This weekend's theatrical hero, Captain Marvel, wouldn't be there if it wasn't for comic creator Kelly Sue DeConnick. So for those who have seen the movie and know her contributions, you might be a bit stunned to not see her name among the Marvel special thanks credits section, where Marvel normally thanks comic creators who had a hand in the stories which these MCU projects are based on. While DeConnick didn't create the character of Carol Danvers, she did co-create and innovate the character as she became Captain Marvel. And the next several years of the character's story along with it, including the Flurkin, the musical planet of Aladna, and the real fire that Carol lit up with after finally stepping in to become Captain Marvel. Yeah, so I just wanted to say over in response to this article here, I feel like there's been so many kind of special credit sections among previous MCU movies that have left out, comic book creator X or comic book creator Y. And when I was on Twitter the other day, I was really happy to see so many comic book creators actually happy with the credits section over in the Marvels. Even though I haven't seen the film there, it's just happy to see that there's just a few more comic book creators that are happily, with how they're credited over in the film. Let's see here. Nobody Except Me. The Marvels was awesome fun. Great movie for adolescent girls and young women with enough MCU action to be fun for a casual, not perfect, but mid-upper tier MCU. Also, great combo with the Loki finale. You know what? I haven't actually seen both. And I know I definitely, at least, like at the bare minimum in terms of Loki, I know I gotta check out that finale. That's gonna be on the list of things to do later on today here. Yuna, Your Diva. I haven't, but can I hate it? I haven't watched anything after Spider-Man No Way Home. Honestly, I think Spider-Man No Way Home was probably one of the most important recent Marvel films. I wouldn't call out anybody for not watching any of the recent MCU movies. I agree with the general consensus in that they've dropped in quality. And I really do think that that's why I've latched on to the comic books so much, over the past, 2 years since I started the channel. I just feel like the publishing is just kicking ass left and right here. I always love going on these streams and talking about all the different ways the publishing is just excelling. I have to say though, at one point I was a little bit more adversarial towards the MCU and towards the movies when they were dropping in quality a little bit. But now that more time has gone by, I've started to realize that the really important thing about what the MCU is doing right now, even if I don't agree with the quality, is getting the exposure out there. I frankly don't know if there is enough average people on the street who know who Miss Marvel Kamala Khan is. I feel like she is like one of the new point of view characters over in the Marvel universe. And so I'm so happy that there is a film starring her right now that's kind of boosting her profile, because now that she's involved directly with the X-Men, it definitely gives me like a launching point in conversation, a different way to kind of talk about comic books as a medium. And I'm really happy that the movie exists, even if I'm not the biggest fan of the quality towards the movie. I think Aman Vellani is incredibly talented. I think she's a great actress. I have been so impressed with the X-Men debut over for Kamala Khan and Miss Marvel, the New Mutant. If you haven't been checking that book out, you should. It's such a great bridge between, the MCU version of Kamala Khan as well as a bridge into modern X-Men comics. I think it's more approachable than a lot of X-Men comics, and it still features like all these big and important elements of Fall of X. So I'm incredibly grateful for the Marvels, and I really hope Eventually the Marvel Cinematic Universe will kind of spin its gears the correct way and really be as strong as it was a few years ago. I think it's definitely better for the publishing if the movies and films are finding a way with audiences. Let's go ahead and see what else everybody has to say here in chat. I think this is a super interesting topic. Let's see here. Nobody except me. Oh man, I'll stay away from spoilers, but yeah, check it out if you can. It will get you excited for what's coming. It's a soap opera. It won't end, and everything won't be for everybody. I agree. But just like anything that keeps going, there'll be highs and lows. Marvel's was a great showcase for Kamala. It made me want to go back and watch her Disney Plus show, which I had skipped. Nobody except me. Unfortunately, as much as I really appreciate Iman Vellani, as much as I really appreciate Kamala Khan, I do not think, at least what I've seen from her, like on-screen appearances in the MCU, I don't think they've evoked some of the best parts of her character in her on-screen representations, and that includes the Miss Marvel television show. I think right now the plot threads in Miss Marvel, the New Mutant, are so much more interesting than like 90% of the content over in that show. Having Miss Marvel's backdrop of people like Bruno as well as her family, it's great. But adding those additional elements with the X-Men, I think move Kamala into just absolute greatness here. So once again, I'm really hoping that as the MCU continues, Miss Marvel will become more and more aligned with the X-Men moving forward. As we mentioned too, in response to these streams and what the MCU is doing as a whole, it really does feel like the X-Men are coming in terms of the MCU. It feels like there's going to be a big upcoming, Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's going to be like a multi-layered, X-Men project just underway in terms of the live action here. All right, let's go ahead and read the rest of this article. It's very like uncontroversial, I would say. Nobody except me. They're already teasing her connection to X-Men. Absolutely, absolutely. At the end of Miss Marvel, they even featured that too. And I believe, if memory serves me right, that was even before the Hellfire Gala in terms of the publishing. So it's almost like, in that one respect, the MCU was almost ahead of where we were over in the comics. One thing about the MCU right now that really sort of bothers me is that the MCU is almost ahead of the comics in terms of turning Miss Marvel into an X-Man. But, like, unfortunately, the comics are now like way ahead, right? We're getting that first element of characterization. We're seeing Miss Marvel join the X-Men. I just think it's so frustrating how long we have to wait to see the development plans be like mapped out for the Marvel Cinematic Universe before they're even shown on film. I think right now is an incredibly like turbulent time over for the MCU as well, because if you kind of look at the articles, if you've checked out, I believe, the pieces from Variety, there's all this trouble behind the scenes. There's all these elements right now too with like the entire franchise was kind of spearheaded around Jonathan Majors. And, with some of those personal allegations against Jonathan Majors, I think it just makes the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole so difficult. It puts a weird look over on Loki. And it just feels like there's so many movies that have this like insane behind the scenes drama right now, while the entire MCU is just having a hard time like reorienting itself. I was kind of reminded, I don't know if I was reading that Variety article, but towards the end of it, they basically said, we've been through this before with Marvel. They've had a bad couple years in terms of some of their, films, in terms of some of their releases, and they've always bounced back. So I'm really expecting eventually, some of these MCU projects, as we mentioned earlier, will kind of bounce back, will kind of find themselves as they continue. I think out of all of like the upcoming projects right now, the Thunderbolts film really has so much potential. A lot of those characters teased in that Thunderbolts roster are so interesting. And also, one bright spot in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe too is the Captain America franchise. To me, it feels like nearly every decision they've made with the Captain America franchise has been great. It feels like there's been good fan response to it too. I think Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think that's a pretty good show, despite some of the family scenes that kind of weigh down the tension. But I just feel like we're in a weird phase in terms of the MCU right now, and we're just waiting for Kevin Feige and all of the other executives over at Marvel to kind of adjust their strategy and let us know what they have in store. Let's see, what else do we have here? Yuna Your Diva can't stay long. Dropping a follow first. I like your enthusiasm. No, thank you for coming to the stream. Really appreciate it here. Nobody except me. Deadpool 3 is next, and Marvel's ends with setup for that. Oh, Marvel sets up Deadpool 3. That's fantastic. Oftentimes it felt like some of the energy towards like the Sony material was so disconnected from the MCU. So honestly, really glad that they're starting to link up, those elements of MCU projects. Well, I think Feige oversees the comics now, doesn't he? You could be right about that, nobody except me. I'm not quite sure. The Variety piece has been noted as lies. Don't fall for the rage bait. I had a feeling that some of the pieces in that Variety article were a little bit, I think, kind of twisted, especially with what they said about the director over for the Marvels. But I do think there's like a couple points of truth to it in that, the strategy for the MCU as it stands right now does have to be adjusted in some shape or form. But I really appreciate that insight that you're lending there. MCU is fine. It's not going to be endgame levels for every movie. I agree. I agree. I just think they need a higher baseline in terms of like movie to movie to movie. And I do think there was a point where the MCU was great. I think it was towards like the beginning, but not quite the very early movies. It was between, Captain America 1, Captain America 2, the first Avengers movie. I think there was a super bright spot over in the MCU where it was just great movie after great movie after great movie. And I feel like we're about to maybe go back there in a couple years, but we're maybe just a few years out from Marvel having a really strong strategy in terms of the MCU and in terms of their television projects too. I really think that when Charlie Cox Daredevil returns over to that new Daredevil Born Again show, I feel like there's so much potential for Marvel to just capitalize absolute gold in terms of that property. I think the Daredevil Netflix show was probably one of the best recent superhero adaptations. And I'm just really hoping that Charlie Cox will kind of break the curse of Marvel television and just truly deliver a great show. I'm also wondering what that Agatha Harkness show is going to turn out like too. I think WandaVision is probably the single most successful and most interesting Marvel shows in terms of Disney Plus here. So I wonder if Agatha is really going to be able to capitalize on that in terms of the MCU appearances. Let's see. Nobody except me says, if you grew up wishing to see Marvel heroes on the big screen, this is awesome. The idea that we can complain about too much Marvel, lol, we are spoiled. Yeah, because we also have the entire line of publishing to appreciate, to bask in here. Okay, let's go ahead and finally learn about why Kelly Sue DeConnick was not thanked alongside some of the other comic book creators over in the Marvels. While DeConnick didn't create the character of Carol Danvers, she did co-create the character as she became Captain Marvel. And the next several years of the character's story along with it. I think we already read this paragraph. Let's head to the next one. DeConnick was heavily involved in the first Captain Marvel movie, acting as a consultant on set and even appearing on screen in a cameo that led me to think up some fan MCU reaction about KSD in the 90s MCU. Sorry, back to the story. While some eagle-eyed fans have chided Marvel Studios for not including Kelly Sue DeConnick in the special thanks section of the credits for the Marvels, it's for a good reason. She was actually a paid creative consultant and was credited as such in a different section of the credits. The other Marvel Comics creators thanked in the Marvels were Neil Adams, Saladin Ahmed, David Aja, Adrian Alfona, Brian Michael Bendis, John Buscema, Sal Buscema, Carmen Carnero, Jim Chung, Chris Claremont, Dave Cockrum, Gene Colan, Carla Conway, Jerry Conway, Matt Fraction, Mark Gruenwald, Russ Heath, Alan Heinberg, Minkyu Jung, Gil Kane, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, Ron Lim, David Lopez, Ron Mars, Jamie McKelvey, Al Milgram, Carlos Pacheco, John Romita Jr., Paul Ryan, Dexter Soy, Roger Stern, Marcio Takara, Roy Thomas, Kelly Thompson, and G. Willow Wilson. It was actually so fun for me to read that in full, because reading some of the names of the comic creators kind of evoked some of the material I've seen, whether it be in Captain Marvel or in some other Marvel projects. Once again, here, it's good to see that Kelly Sue DeConnick is so closely involved over with the Marvel's, cinematic universe. I think she's just such an incredibly talented creator. And, having that guiding voice of one of the key creators of the comics, I think should lead to, better films, a better entertainment product over at the end of the day. I'm also really hoping that in, whatever the future holds in store for Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel, that the next project featuring these characters is going to be more ambitious, is going to be more ambitious and is going to have more of a premise that's going to allow for a higher quality in terms of the film here. All right, so that was our deep dive into Miss Marvel and Kelly Sue DeConnick. And now I want to once again here switch gears and head back into the publishing. We actually have a really fascinating news story in store talking about Normie Osborn, who is actually the grandson of Norman Osborn. He's recently been paired with the Rascal symbiote. And in terms of Marvel's symbiote-esque Venom publishing, there's been all these interesting science fiction elements melded into the premise. I have loved the dramatic tension that having a young character like Normie heading into an Osborn has created for the Marvel publishing. I also think it's so interesting right now how the main Venom character is actually Eddie Brock's son, Dylan. This cover is actually a fight over between Normie and Dylan, and it's also sadly the final issue of Red Goblin. This is Alex Packnadell's Twitter, and he's directly referencing here that this issue 10 is the finale here. He says, next week, goodbye. We can see over in the replies on Twitter, we have another Twitter user here saying, "What? No, I love this series. I picked up issue 1 out of curiosity. Then it was at the top of my read pile every time I got my subs." Alex Packnadell, the writer of the series, says, "Thank you so much for sticking with us. Best readers ever." I'm not ready, but I'm ready. I'll look back very fondly on this series, man. Can't wait. Truly, sincerely, thank you for sticking with us for the ride. Means more to me than you'll ever know. Sad to see it go. One of my all-time favorites, and you're one of mine, so same. Honestly, in terms of Red Goblin, I feel like Marvel could have published this for a really long time. Having younger characters become superheroes, I think, gives so much more mileage to creating like really fascinating scenarios. And I also want to go ahead and preview the finale of Red Goblin with you as well. There's some interesting material over in this specific comic book. Normie has had a really hard time managing the relationship with his Rascal symbiote. Really throughout the pages of Red Goblin, Rascal is always looking for really violent ways to resolve problems over in the series. And finally, Normie has tried to give in to some of Rascal's desires, but it's really causing so much internal tension between Normie and some of the other people over in his life, including the character of Dylan. Let's go ahead and check out the solicit over behind Red Goblin 10. And I want to give a thank you to Adventures in Poor Taste. A hive divided. As Normie Osborn loses himself to his symbiote and his family's legacy, his only friend Dylan Brock, also known as Venom, stands as the last line of defense between what's left of Normie Osborn and the monstrosity called the Red Goblin. Normie has finally given in to the symbiote's nature. Together, they've put the resurrected Goblin King back in the ground permanently. Now Rascal is on a rampage, targeting everyone who's hurt Normie in the past. After a battle with Norman Osborn at the site of Harry's grave, Rascal learned that he is the true source of Normie's pain, and the creature blames the one responsible for their bond, Venom. So Red Goblin 10, written by Alex Packnadell, featuring art from Chris Campana. We have inks from Roberto Paggi, colors David Curiel, letters from VC's Joe Caramagna, and a cover from In-hyuk Lee. Yeah, I think some of the artwork over from Chris Campana in this series is just so dynamic. The page layouts give so much additional texture, bleeds, and negative space over to this issue. And I think we have some great captions, some understating writing, regarding Dylan over on this page. I want to read you some of his captions here. We should hurry. The child is angry, dangerous. He will harm innocents. Hurry, Dylan. It's Normie. Angry and dangerous is his baseline. I did not mean the Osborne boy. Yeah, well, Normie and Rascal kind of come as a package deal these days, thanks to me, so I don't suppose it makes much difference. What will we do when we find them? Whatever we have to, Venom says. And we get the introduction, the tease of Normie as a Red Goblin over on this final panel before he makes his introduction over with a big punch towards Dylan on this page here. Also, really think the design over for the Red Goblin is so striking with these traces of fire kind of bleeding out over in his mouth towards the background. Interesting. The child's anger is directed at us, Dylan. Is it something we said? Once again here, we get so much conflict over between the Rascal symbiote and Dylan as Venom in this comic. I think there's just so much tragedy weaved within the pages of Red Goblin as we've consistently seen Normie try and do the right thing again and again and again and become consistently foiled by like the violent situations. In some previous issues of Red Goblin, we directly saw Normie try to use his symbiote in order to protect Norman Osborn. So really seeing the pathos, these tense and really harrowing situations that Normie finds himself in are so fascinating. And I really hope that Marvel will continue to publish Normie as a character. I think he extends and expands the Amazing Spider-Man franchise in some interesting ways. Right now, I feel like I'm having this issue in terms of Spider-Man where there's so many comics, there's so many stories that use very similar characters, and it ends up creating these scenarios that are just so shockingly similar to each other. Anytime Marvel sort of branches out and tries out characters who are a little bit more outside the beaten path of Spider-Man, I'm really going to try to put an emphasis over on these books. If you haven't checked out Red Goblin, would definitely encourage you to go back and take a look over at this 10-issue series. I think it's been a ton of fun here. All right, we're going to go ahead and check in with one of our next series. This is the Astonishing Iceman, issue 4. This one written by Steve Orlando and drawn over from Vincenzo Carratù. I really love the way that this series has featured so many tense scenarios over between Bobby as Iceman fighting back against Orcus. This issue is a ton of fun too. It features a team up over between Bobby and Spider-Man. Let's read a little bit more about this over in the solicit here. Amazing friends back in New York City. Orcus hunts in New York, but this time they're not after mutants. The ever-amazing Spider-Man swings onto the scene. But what new force will Orcus unleash that'll require the titanic team-up of Iceman and the friendly neighborhood wallcrawler? Don't miss the coolest reunion of the fall, or the revamped villain who has Iceman in his sights. So Astonishing Iceman issue 4, written over from Orlando, illustrated by Vincenzo Carratù, additional art from Chris Sotomayor, Javier Tartaglia, and Jesus Saiz. Yeah, I think some of the artwork over from Carratù is just so expressive and manages to operate within Marvel's house style with such a beautiful and nimble line here. On this first image, we see Spider-Man going up over against Feral in an incredibly dynamic page that features tons of really beautiful panel bleeds and some really expressive colors over from the art team too. And we have this really interesting character introducing herself over on the page. She says, "The name's Chantal, Spider-Man. I'm Genoshan. A mutate. Got the tattoo removed. I've been hunted. New York was a fresh start." And we see Spider-Man responded saying, "Fresh, right? Fresh and deadly." Elsewhere, we get yet another character fighting off against Spider-Man known as Fatal. We see Spidey saying, "Come on, Fatal. In the way's my favorite spot. Now, where's your friend?" "No, Reaper." "Do it. Go ahead. I won't beg." That's what Chantal's saying over in response to Reaper. And this gives way to the introduction of Iceman over on the final page saying, "Sorry to leave you cold, Reaper, but Iceman's got a reputation to protect." Once again, I really love the way that this page is designed here. This uncanny pose that Spider-Man is striking next to Iceman really does a fantastic job illustrating his personality. The way that this panel towards the bottom of the page is bleeding out and is introduced over in a canted line, I think is just so expressive and fascinating to look at here. We have Chantal saying, "Don't joke, the hounds. Come in three, Fatal's gone." Finally, in our last blurb over in the preview here, Iceman is bleeding out of the page and he says, "Relax. Farrell's a sore sack of fur, and I can ace Farmer Death with my eyes closed. What's the worst one spooky slice lady could?" And there you go. This astonishing Iceman issue leaves us in suspense for the upcoming pages. I've really liked how tense this comic book has been. Bobby's kind of a hard sell for me in terms of some of the remainder of the X-Men characters. But the way that Orcus has been behind him like every single step of the way, and the way that Bobby is really trying to come back from the really harrowing position that the end of the Hellfire Gala put him in, has made this astonishing Iceman book so fascinating and a very welcomed addition over into the greater Fall of X publishing line. Hope you enjoyed our preview over for Astonishing Iceman. Really encourage you to go ahead and check out that series. There's a really exciting comic book coming in underway at Marvel on November 22nd. This one is very exciting for me personally because it features just a fantastic creative team. We've already covered this in a ton of depth, but let's go ahead and explore some of the preview pages for Marvel Comics' upcoming Carnage series. This one features Cletus Cassidy returning, trying to get a massive power upgrade, and it's very interesting because it's written from Toron Grandbeck, featuring artwork from Pere Perez and some colors from Eric Arcienega. Absolute Cassidy. Every symbiote needs a host, and for Carnage, there has only ever been one host who has made it feel whole. And it's time for a reunion. Don't miss this shocking and unexpected start to the next chapter of Carnage's storyline, one which lays the ground for the next Venom epic. Carnage has fought his way across the multiverse as a symbiote without a host. He managed to rid himself of almost all the classic symbiote weaknesses and attain godlike power. Can it possibly be enough, or is something missing? Someone still missing to truly make him whole. I really appreciate the way that this page is designed, introducing the rest of our creative team over on the issue. Let's go ahead and explore some of the beautiful preview pages that we have coming in over from Pere Perez and Eric Arcienega here. So first of all, I think this page is designed with such a beautiful sense of perspective as we're introduced to the omnipotent, let's see if I can get that word right today, the Omnipotence City in the Nexus of the Gods, the place of divine fellowship. And there is already so much carnage, so much blood featured on this first page, with this head just kind of floating through space over in the tail. We've already taken a look at this preview page unlettered, but seeing it in context here doesn't remove any of the beauty. I think Pere Perez has really appreciated and leveled up the comics game here. The way that this page is positioned and directed is so bold and beautiful. I love the way that Carnage has his voice open, or his mouth open, and the way that his entire head is kind of glowing with this yellow hue is so ominous over in the tail. Plus, I think the way that Toron Grunbeck is utilizing these elements of fantasy and melding it into space as well as the Carnage property is so fascinating. You'd almost expect to see a fantasy-like story in this issue, but instead we're introduced to Carnage causing so much chaos and violence over in this library. And we finally get to see some of these other fantasy-inspired characters trying to put a stop to Carnage's reign of terror. We have this hero here saying, "You came to the Hall of All-Knowing. seeking what all who come here seek: answers. Yet, you do not have the courage to articulate the questions you want to ask. You came here to learn if you are a god. Yeah, it seems like Cletus is so powerful, but yet he's still looking for some kind of power upgrade here. Nobody except me says, I'm going to enjoy when they bring the symbiotes back to Earth/ground level. Interesting. So you're not as big of a fan of some of these kind of powered up fantasy elements in terms of the symbiotes, because I think that that is really what's making this Carnage book stand out over across other titles. We have Cletus saying, "You know what I am. I have conquered every weakness of the symbiote. I have the powers of a god, the immortality of a god. I have made myself what I am." The librarian says, "And you come to us for answers you already have, asking all the wrong questions." Cletus's last blurb over in our preview, he says, "Then enlighten me, Lord Librarian. What are the right questions?" And that is our preview over for Carnage issue 1. Very fascinated by the lengths that Carnage is going to power himself up even more. I think Toran Grondbeck already has an interesting premise built up for this series, showing Cletus really consuming this sense of greed and trying to power himself up as much as possible. I really hope that before the first issue of Carnage ends, we're introduced to somebody, to some figure that has the tools and abilities to stop Cletus Cassidy in order to tell a really fascinating story. I'm very intrigued to see if Dylan or Normie are going to get involved with their symbiotes over in the issue. Plus, we also have the tease of Black Widow. If Marvel is kind of gearing up to pitch Natasha Romanoff's symbiote over against Carnage, I think that would be a really fascinating story. I would love to see that play out on the page. Right now, Marvel just has so many fascinating younger characters involved with these symbiotes, and I think there are so many rife and fascinating opportunities just on the horizon over with Cletus Cassidy. Very excited for this new Carnage series to finally debut here. I've never really enjoyed a Carnage comic over in the past with Marvel. I feel like too often these symbiote stories are just a trap for telling like hyper-violent Spider-Man comics. So the new Venom series has just been a huge breath of fresh air over for Marvel and my relationship with the character. I'm really hoping that Marvel as a whole will continue to publish these symbiote characters as younger heroes that have more storylines, that have more pathos, especially with the science fiction backdrop, to continue making this property way more interesting than it has been over in the past. All right, hope you enjoyed our deep dive over into Carnage as well as the rest of these symbiote heroes. We are just right adjacent over to X-Men. Before we get into this big X-Men story, let's see what Nobody Except Me says. Let's see, it's fun for now, but I noticed how everyone complained about the X-Men leveling up with Krakoa and wants them back suffering in the mansion ASAP, but Venom, Carnage go space gods with unlimited power. Yeah, it has to be written with a lot of precision. It has to be written with, somebody who has the ability and that insight to tell these types of stories. I have so much trust and faith over with Toran Grondbeck. I think Toran Grondbeck is just doing a wonderful job characterizing Black Widow over with her symbiote in the main Venom book. And I'm also hoping that Grondbeck will be able to create a scenario where these two books kind of link up and are able to really operate together over in terms of the Marvel Universe. I do see what you're saying, though, and I do wish that there was a way for Marvel to tell a Carnage story, maybe without a fantasy backdrop that just wasn't so insanely violent. Okay, so without further ado here, let's go ahead and explore some of the final issues over in Uncanny Avengers. Nobody Except Me. One more comment here before we head into this, but to be fair, the Null stuff just never hit for me. The only Null content that I really can endorse, the only Null content that I can really co-sign over in the Marvel Universe is Silver Surfer Black. That comic book is so wild. It's so wonderful. And I think the design for Null is so cool. I think that all we need is just the right writer telling the right story. And I think Null is going to look like one of the most powerful adversaries over in the Marvel Universe. Would love to see Toron Grondbeck take up the character of Null and really put all these fantasy elements over in the Marvel Universe. It was really crazy reading Grondbeck's Thor run. There were so many elements of fantasy that she introduced in that book. It was so difficult for me to keep up with that comic book as it was published, but all of the plot threads, all of the backdrop, all the fantasy setting was so interesting. I think Realm of X has been really cool. I think Grondbeck has so many fascinating ideas that she brings over to all these Marvel comics. I definitely don't think it's a coincidence that she continues to operate in all of these like fantasy books that always take on, some of these Asgardian settings as well. All right, that's enough tangents over on Venom comics and symbiotes. Let me go ahead and switch my tangent brain over to the other thing that we talk about ad nauseum. This is Marvel's X-Men Uncanny Avengers, which is basically a team up between the Avengers and X-Men comics. We've really seen this team over with Captain America and Rogue fight off against the Mutant Liberation Front over in the backdrop of the massive attack that Orcus staged over on the Hellfire Gala. Let's go ahead and read a little bit more about Uncanny Avengers issue 4. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. For one issue, Orcus comes to the conclusion that they cannot control Captain Krakoa. And on the eve of his great triumph, with the world about to burn, they must turn to Avengers Unity Squad. Plus, witness the blooming of the unlikeliest romance, let's see if I can speak here, in Uncanny Avengers history. All right, so we have a few things to talk about before we dive in over to this issue. First off, there is so much rampant speculation boiling across the internet that the new version of Captain Krakoa is actually the Hydra version of Captain America. Just looking to manifest here. I think that's going to be very interesting. Plus, we've also seen relationships start to develop between Quicksilver and Monet in some previous issues of Uncanny Avengers, so that'll be fun to check in with. And we're also going to see our team once again fight back against the Captain Krakoa-led Mutant Liberation Front. Once again here, let's see if I can speak today. Uncanny Avengers 4, written by Jerry Duggan, illustrated by Javier Guerin, colors from Maury Hollowell, and letters from Travis Lanham. We have this cool X-Men homage cover teasing the threat of Orcus and all these disparate plot threads over from Marvel. Quicksilver and Penance battled the Mutant Liberation Front members Fenris and were able to plant trackers on the twins before they escaped, putting them one step closer to exposing Captain Krakoa's true identity. Meanwhile, Captain America worked with reporter Ben Urich to expose the anti-mutant organization Orcus. As part of their investigation, Cap and Urich met with the sole human witness to the recent Hellfire Gala massacre, revealed to be Wilson Fisk, also known as the criminal Kingpin. Grayson Red says, yeah, I think it's Steve-O for sure. Evil Steve indeed. Here's our tease over at Steve-O directly on the page with just that great sense of perspective from Javier Guerin. Beautiful panel bleeds. Really interesting, like, canted angles over on the panels, too. Let's read a little bit more of Captain Krakoa's direct dialogue to see if we can get any hints in regards to whether he's Steve-O or not. You all have your orders. If I don't rendezvous with you, it's because I was killed taking out Orcus's space station. It's been an honor to serve with you all. And we have Blob saying, thank you, Cyclops. Of course, Blob, you're a good soldier. Dr. Stasis, interestingly enough, is not addressing Captain Krakoa as Cyclops. He calls him Captain Krakoa over on this next page. It looks like we get like a simulated Zoom call over with these two characters. Stasis says, Captain Krakoa, thank you for taking my call. Krakoa says, been busy. What the hell do you need a nuke for? Insurance. Ah, I see. You don't think you need Orcus? Just so you know, a reporter just asked questions about you, about your identity. I know you wanted complete anonymity, but perhaps Someone you trust talked. The reporter's name was Ben Urich. Should you decide calling on him is in our mutual best interest, stasis out. And we see Captain Krakoa saying, "Damn it, Andrea." Also, I think giving a little bit of a tease as to what his identity is over in the first place. Plus, over in these next sequences, we just get a beautiful bleed between not one, not two, but three panels with Monet saying directly over to Quicksilver, "Let me guess, you took them all down." I think Javier Garrin is so great at designing these elements on the page and lends so much visceral energy over to Uncanny Avengers. I really wish this series was an ongoing. I think there are so many fascinating plot threads spinning around over in this particular storyline. Really, what we're seeing right now is our team right about to head into a battle scenario over with the Mutant Liberation Front. They were able to locate their headquarters and are about to go ahead and break in. On this next panel, we can see the character of Wildside, as well as the Fenris twins and Blob at the Mutant Liberation Front, saying, "Look alive, we've got company." But it looks like Wildside is too late here, as we have the Black Widow right behind him with the gun pointed directly to his head. And Wildside's last line of dialogue says, "My mutant gifts let me crack that brain open and pull out the worst suffering." Yeah, I wish we had more preview pages. I think this is a hell of a way to leave off over for Uncanny Avengers. I'm just surprised at how much I've been able to engage with this series despite how short it is and despite how quickly it came together over in terms of Marvel. To be fair, I think the last issue, issue 3, did not do a great job, building the series towards its next destination. I think it had just a few fun elements of characterization and not much more than that. But on the whole, I think the amount of plot threads, the interactions, the dialogue, the artwork across this series has been nothing short of phenomenal here. Yeah, really nothing but good things to say over about this new volume of Uncanny Avengers. I don't think I've ever been this invested before in the Uncanny Avengers franchise, period. You know what? I think that that is all of our Marvel coverage over for today. Oh no, we have one more X-Men piece. This one's actually a good one. Let's go ahead and check this one out, and then we'll head over to DC. So it looks like Tom Brevoort is being a little bit loose-lipped about some of the elements about the upcoming X-Men relaunch taking place after Krakoa. I have to say, this is probably one of my most hyped, one of my most anticipated comic books over in the next year. Let's learn a little bit more about how many X-Men comics are going to be a part of Tom Brevoort's upcoming X-Men relaunch following in the wake of Krakoa. Just how big will Marvel's upcoming X-Men launch be? Tom Brevoort outlines the number of titles to expect. This one is coming in from Grant D'Armit over from Popverse. Brevoort took to Substack to discuss the amount of books the new era will X-Men consist of. One thing is for sure, there'll be a lot of them. With all this talk about Marvel relaunching their X-Men line, you might get it in their head that the House of Ideas is going to slow up. Take a break from the publishing of the ocean of X books and go to a smaller, more concentrated stream, and you'd be wrong. Tom Brevoort recently spoke about the number of titles any franchise would have at a given time, and since he's about to take over the captain's chair, turn the subject to the mutant line of comics. Specifically, the question directed to Brevoort was about what goes into deciding how many books to put out at any given time, which the longtime Marvel editor explained like this. This is somewhat decided by the needs of the publishing division as a whole. We need to put out a certain overall number of titles, each one generating a needed profit margin in order to pay out for our overhead and keep this division profitable. So while there's a bit of ebb and flow to this, in general, you're likely to get approximately the same number of releases in a given family of titles month after month. I think this quote is going to lead to a really fascinating conversation here, First off, I do not understand why Marvel thinks that their comic books need to be profitable. And I know that on its face, that seems like a ridiculous thing to say. If you're in the publishing division, shouldn't you be trying to generate money? But I don't really think money, I don't really think revenue is the true goal of what comic books are trying to accomplish. I really think that what they're actually trying to do is set up brand new intellectual property and stories for the upcoming television and film projects. In that respect, it's very nervous right now that audience response is so frustrated over to some of those recent, Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, because if that kind of falls off, I don't think, the publishing line is going to benefit over from that. So I'm really perplexed by the way that Tom Brevoort talks about the publishing in some of these instances. And I'm kind of curious as to why Marvel feels the need to publish just so many X-Men titles month after month after month. There's just a staggering amount of miniseries. I think this article actually details the exact amount of books. Let's see, which is to say, continue the Mutants' new boss. Those folks who were hoping that the X-Men line would only go down to about 4 books are in for a world of disappointments. He continues, we may be one of quite as many at the jump as the end of the outgoing era does, but it'll still be in the neighborhood and will likely increase as we move ahead and more stuff gets greenlit. It's a bold move, especially considering that the current era of X-Men comics is currently being told by 6 ongoing series and 8 limiteds. This is what I was looking for earlier. That is just an absolute, staggering amount of comic books. I do not think that Marvel needs quite that many miniseries in order to tell a complete vision over for the X-Men line of comics. For a total of 14 books, 14 comics at the end of the outgoing era. Keep in mind, too, that the Krakoan Age began with all of 2 books, House of X and Powers of 10, and we're not even counting all the series that have started and ended as the Krakoan Age went along. So whatever Brevoort and Marvel are planning, we know it's going to have quite the range. To Marvel's credit, they appear to be serious about making the X-Men their next biggest brand. But with a lot of buzz about the X-Men joining the MCU, there's never been a better time to put their money where the mutants are. Yeah, in terms of the publishing line, I think what we said yesterday in terms of what Tom Brevoort has in store for the X-Men comics is, I think previously the Avengers line that he was overseeing had so many books that were kind of disparate and didn't relate to each other. I'm really hoping that as he joins the X-Men titles, the way that the publishing has continued to operate, which has really been to link up all the comics across each other, especially as we've continued into Fall of X continues. I think Marvel's editorial in terms of the X-Men comics is firing on all cylinders right now, and I hope that some of those elements continue even with what Tom Brevoort has in store for the X-Men. And even though I know that there's going to be maybe one singular comic book spearheading the line, I still hope that the rest of the X-Men books are going to be able to take on some of those really strong plot threads in order to complement that main series, as opposed to it holding down the rest of the team. My goal here is still to have the trinity of X writers, being Cy Spurrier, Kieran Gillen, and Al Ewing, all have a comic book in the new era of X-Men. So I hope there isn't too much of an emphasis on one singular book guiding the line. Grayson Red, been loving the pacing of Uncanny Avengers. I agree. I think maybe aside from the last issue, the book has done a great job getting right to the point and telling really subversive comics. Nobody Except Me. Sounds like X-Men are still selling. You don't run 14 books if they aren't popular. That is a great point to make. That's a really fantastic point to make. Also, I'm curious if anybody has gone over to their comic book store. Have you heard anything about the reception as to how the Fall of X books are selling? I actually was able to frequent comic book stores more right when the Hellfire Gala debuted a couple months ago. And it was actually interesting to talk to comic book store owners. Some of the response I heard was that there was more of a renewed interest in the X-Men line following the Hellfire Gala, but before that, like the books weren't selling at all. And it was also pretty difficult for me to locate books like the first chapter of Uncanny Avengers. I have a feeling that some retailers were like under ordering it because they didn't expect the renewed interest to circulate regarding the X-Men line. Grayson read, business is business. In my comic book shop, they're still selling a lot better since Fall of X. Oh, really glad to hear that, Grayson read. Yeah, really fantastic to hear as well. Let's see. So, in terms of these X Men comics, goodness, I had one more thing to say, but it has totally escaped me as of right now. Nobody except me. We also live in an increasingly digital marketplace. That's right. And that's why I think comic books are so cool. It's like you don't have that many special interest shops relegated to one thing. And it's almost like the direct market is powerful and that it has, like a couple thousand, a couple tens of thousands of people each month buying comics. I just think it's hard to find a fan base that's loyal, that's that loyal over to the product. But sadly, I have a feeling that some of these kind of Wednesday warriors are continue to like dwindle and dwindle and dwindle as more time goes by. I wish there was a way to convert more people from like the MCU, the cinematic universe, over into the comic book funnel. And I finally remembered that one thing I forgot that I was going to say about these X-Men comics. It's so sad to me considering how many people actually jumped on board the X-Men franchise with House of X and Powers of 10 and how few people have stayed in the Krakoan era since then. I don't blame anybody who hasn't been able to like stick out through the whole thing because honestly, there's just been like, I don't know, maybe more than 100 comics. It's just been dizzying to see the amount of product that's been shipped. But I just got so addicted to the way that each comic book in terms of the X-Men line matters over for Krakoa. It almost feels like each individual comic book is like a drop in the bucket. And when you take out the full bucket and you see like all these individual comics that have contributed to it, you get like the most amazing, the most epic X-Men status quo than gosh darn it than what I've ever seen here. So once again, I hope Tom Brevoort is able to help find that kind of magic formula for the next X-Men relaunch that keeps readers reading throughout the entire era of the publisher, even throughout all of the disparate reboots and relaunches across the line here. All right, well, I think that was my big X-Men rant. I think we are all over with that, and we are finally set to go ahead and explore some DC news items today. First off, we're going to go ahead and preview the first issue of Speed Force. Let me tell you, the main Flash series right now from Cy Spurrier and Mike Deodato has just been blowing my mind. The way that Spurrier and Deodato find like these insane science fiction threats for the Flash to fight, even while Wally has like a full family, has just been like dizzying to keep track of. And it seems like some of the other speedsters are going to get caught over in the mix with Avery Ho and Wallace West. This issue was kind of fleshing out some of the additional members of the Flash family in a comic book called Speed Force. I think it's really cool how DC has been doing this. We also got a secondary, right now DC Comics recently relaunched the Wonder Woman comic book, and we got a relaunched book over with some of the ancillary Amazons called Amazon's Attack. So this book is almost fleshing out some of the ancillary speedster characters with Speed Force. Let's go ahead and check this one out. From the pages of The Flash, Wallace West and Avery Ho bring the Speed Force into the dawn of DC. Wallace and Avery, the young speedsters, have been Teen Titans, Justice Leaguers, and above all, members of the Flash family. As they become aware of mysterious changes happening to the Speed Force, they race to Keystone City, where they encounter old friends, new threats, and a chance to forge their own paths. Spinning out of the pages of The Flash, Jarrett Williams and Danielle D. Nicuelo bring the next generation of speedsters into the dawn of DC. So Speed Force 1 written by Jarrett Williams, art, Daniel D. Nicuelo, colors, Andrew Dahlhaus, and letters from Simon Boland. And the artwork from Danielle D. Nicuelo is just so expressive, so wonderful. capturing these really deep dive and these really big aspects over in terms of the ancillary Flash family. Really find this sequence on the first page to be so beautiful as we're teased with these character introductions here. We can see Wallace and Avery playing video games, but the art team is not yet looking to reveal their faces. We even get the tease of Avery, Wallace, and Connor's hair on the next panel with a full introduction towards the third panel on the page, introducing Wallace, Avery, and Connor. I thought it was fascinating how Jarrett Williams was able to paint a scenario where the Flash family are able to tap into their speed force in order to play video games at this accelerated rate here. Plus, on this next sequence, I think there's so much wonderful camaraderie and there's so many beautiful panel bleeds across the page too, with Wallace directly acknowledging the fact that it looks like he's won over in this video game between the characters. These characters are also about to head into Star Labs as they get notified that there's a mysterious threat happening that's causing all these scientists to be abducted over in the series too. We can see on this next page both Wallace and Avery are leaping into action here. Once again, this page is structured so beautifully with all of these wonderful bleeds and this really canted angle that we have for our characters too. I want to go ahead and read this blurb introducing the series to give you a bit more context. When Wallace West and Avery Ho acquired super speed courtesy of the Speed Force, they joined the fastest family of heroes alive. But now the Flash has been pulled away from his fellow speedsters, both by mysterious glitches in his powers and by the appearance of a deadly new threat, which means the young speedsters are on their own. Once again, the main Flash comic book has told a status quo that's been so subversive. I'm so happy to see that we have a book tapping into some of those elements and featuring the expanded Flash family. Wallace and Avery are both like really young and interesting new heroes in terms of the DC universe. I'm also interested to see if these characters are going to head into a romantic relationship or what the characterization has next for them in terms of Dawn of DC. Okay, hope you enjoyed our look over into Speed Force. I've got some high hopes over for this series. I think the writing really appears to be a ton of fun, and the art is looking incredibly visceral here. Why don't we talk about the latest issue of Batman and Robin? I've been such a big fan of this series. I think the tone on this Joshua Williamson, Simone DeMeo comic book has been just right as the months have started to go by here. Over in recent issues of Batman and Robin, we've seen Damian and Bruce fight against these animal-themed villains over at DC. In the last issue, we were introduced to the fact that the new villain known as Shush, the female version of Hush, actually has some relation over to these characters. Plus, over at the end of that particular issue, we were able to see Damian and Bruce try and interrogate White Rabbit to learn more about where these animal-themed villains and Shush are coming from. Without further ado, let's give a big thanks to Adventures in Poor Taste and take a look at this beautiful preview over for the excellent Batman and Robin 3. Father and son prison break. White Rabbit is a key witness in uncovering Gotham City's newest criminal mastermind, and Batman and Robin realize the only way to keep her safe is to break her out of Arkham Tower. But Damian still has his homework to deal with. We already said Batman and Robin 3 coming in from Williamson, Simone DeMeo, letters from Steve Wands. Look at the incredible page layout and design from DeMeo here. Also, I think the colors are so beautiful and subversive in this book. We only have hues of like white, red, black, and gray on this sequence, but I think the art team is just making the most out of the material that they have available to them. We have a really cocky Damian saying, "I know everything, Pennyworth. My mother's home had the largest library you've ever seen. I had the finest trainers in every form of combat known to man and dedicated instructors that showed me the deep knowledge of the world more than any book. What could anyone in Gotham possibly teach me?" I think this is such a funny page because we saw this very similar kind of storyline from the perspective of Luke Fox and Kate Kane yesterday in our preview over for Outsiders. But instead, we're seeing this sequence over with Damian and Bruce, where Bruce is directly catching the Robin, I don't know, R battering that Damian is throwing towards Bruce. I love this sequence so much. I think it shows the fatherly nature of Bruce that we don't get to see in all these like disparate elements over in the Batman property. Nobody except me, you're right. Imagine if we still had comics in grocery shops and Walmart. Maybe people would read comics. I totally agree with you. Such a shame. Like this, I think people might read this if it was in the store. Especially because people seem to know who Hush is. People would be interested in knowing who Shush is. I don't know. I don't know. And then we're introduced to Bruce saying, no matter how much training or experience you have, the moment you think you know everything is usually right around the time someone pulls a fast one on you. I love the way this flashback sequence really, I think, naturally and organically segues into the modern day as we get to see Bruce and Damian trying to interrogate the White Rabbit. Once again here, the way that DeMeo is able to lay out this page is incredibly visceral with all these really fascinating, panels introducing the architecture over in this issue too. And we have Bruce and Damian attempting to find the White Rabbit here. The White Rabbit says, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya. I think actually these last couple panels are some of the most interesting elements of our preview here. We actually get to see Shush saying, terrible trio, it's rabbit season. And while that does sound like an incredibly silly piece of dialogue, really what it tells me about Shush is that she's not only working with these animal-themed villains, but she's also sending them all directly after Bruce as well. So really interesting stuff. I can't wait to see Bruce and Damian finally fight back against Shush in some of these future issues, and to finally get to the root at what all these animal-themed villains have in store over for DC Comics. All right, I think that was actually the last preview we have to look at today. So next up, let's go ahead and head into what I think is one of the most exciting stories over for our stream. We're actually going to preview what DC has in store for some upcoming plans here. DC signals a trinity of evil with the new Dawn of DC details and timeline into 2024. We have some brand new previews for upcoming DC comics and a tease at what they have in store for the end of Dawn of DC. This article is coming in over from David Brooke from our favorite website, Adventures in Poor Taste. Let's see what DC has in store. DC Comics has released a new info on major storylines that'll have ramifications in 2024. They've dubbed a Trinity of Evil is coming. Along with the info, there's plenty of cover art. So, where's the Trinity of Evil? It appears to be Amanda Waller, Queen Brainiac, and Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. But it's still unconfirmed. What isn't unclear is a newly minted Dawn of DC timeline, which you can view below. I have really been anticipating looking at this article, but I haven't looked at it in this much detail since the stream right now. I actually had no idea that our new Trinity of Evil is Amanda Waller, Queen Brainiac, and the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. I think that is so exciting. Everything that Chip Zdarsky has been doing along with his collaborators like Mike Hawthorne on the main Batman series has been really, really enthralling. While I wasn't the biggest fan of that Catwoman arc towards the Gotham War in recent Batman issues, I think the most recent Batman issue that was published was just a fantastic return to form that featured so many interesting elements of Zur-En-Arrh. I'm so happy that we have a run based around this idea. I think this idea was always kind of lingering over in the Grant Morrison comic book series, so having a writer really touch on and expand that property has led to so many interesting elements of Batman. And I love that DC is also kind of really bolstering this character to be featured in regards to their Trinity of Evil too. I think it makes for so many interesting story scenarios that should be headed our way into the DC universe. Plus, it looks like the publisher is looking to make good on some of those teasers over for recent Superman issues, and we're getting to see the appearance of Queen Brainiac, Also, there's been a lot of DC comics that have been trying to set up Amanda Waller in a really big and bold capacity, especially comics that you wouldn't expect to see her in, like Doom Patrol and the main Titans book over from DC. So, yeah, I think the Trinity of Evil actually should realign DC and get some interesting stories headed very soon here. What isn't unclear is a newly minted Dawn of DC timeline, which you can view below. I think it's also been a ton of fun watching DC continually update this teaser image for Dawn of DC, introducing these new ideas and storylines here. Dawn of DC has been pretty successful as far as I'm concerned. I think a lot of these publishing ventures have been really successful. I think we were huge fans of Lazarus Planet, or at least I was. I love the way that book touched on a tour across the DCU and upgraded some of those characters with additional powers. I loved all the horror storylines and night terrors. I'm not sure how strong fan reception was as a whole to that story, but I think it created a lot of really quality comics. Wasn't as big of a fan of Gotham War, but I think there's a ton of potential in terms of Titans Beast World. Yeah, I'm very excited to see Tom Taylor expand the publishing of the Titans too. There just seems to be so much potential in what he has in store. DC also promised Dawn of DC will continue through 2024, and next up for the lineup is Titans Beast World. That event will have Beast Boy losing control of his powers, unleashing them on the DC universe with villains and heroes fighting to retain their humanity. Waller will leverage this to rid the world of metahumans. Grayson Red, yeah, I love that it feels like DC has an actual plan and through line, even though I didn't like Night Terrors breaking up the line. No, I definitely understand that to a certain degree. I do think, though, that the main Night Terror series was actually surprisingly fantastic. Even though I think some of the elements were a little bit repetitious, the actual characterization for people like Deadman and Wesley Dodds were really, really strong over in that series. It was just a little bit puzzling to me as to why fan response was so negative for such a short event. Maybe it's because Dawn of DC just got underway before I think Night Terrors kind of derailed the publishing plans a little bit. I wish DC would have waited because I think fan response to Night Terrors could have been a lot better if they maybe had positioned it differently. Waller's scheming begins in Action Comics 1060 and Titans Beast World Tour Metropolis, both on sale December 12th. Wow, that's just a couple weeks away here, huh? She plans to recruit superheroes and supervillains for a new Task Force X, with Nia Nile Dreamer playing a vital role. All right, let's sit here and talk about that for a minute once I can talk. Okay, so I think Nia Nile, aka Dreamer, such a great character in terms of DC. I think Nicole Maines is just very, very interesting. Very happy that DC is continuing to really bolster the character of Dreamer. Let's see. What that role is and who else will be enlisted is still shrouded in mystery, but fans will find out what Amanda Waller has planned for Dreamer and the rest of the new team when the new series Suicide Squad Dream Team launches in March. Wow, so we're going to get an Amanda Waller Dreamer book. That sounds really dark, but definitely interested in what DC has in store for that one. And we also have a preview for Titans Beast World Metropolis. This one looks really crazy. Introducing Power Girl to this red bird, this phoenix type aesthetic here. We also have Dreamer, Supergirl, and John Kent teaming up here. Wow, there's some beautiful artwork, incredibly expressive art and panel bleeds over with Dreamer on this opening page here. Yeah, really beautiful artwork. This page with Amanda Waller is so much more sinister than what we saw in the earlier images here. Yeah, really cool to see Dawn of DC kind of finally culminating into all these plot threads with Amanda Waller. I like the long game that the publisher has been playing in terms of these storylines.
This must be one of the last issues that Philip Kennedy Johnson is writing in terms of Action Comics. Very cool that we're getting a team up over with Superman and John Constantine. I really think that Johnson will definitely find some really wonderful, some really tense and biting scenarios over with these characters. We also have Eddie Barrows on artwork. Man, he's fantastic. Yeah, really a beautiful way to draw upon house style over in these pages. Also introducing Amanda Waller over to the world of Metropolis once again here. Okay, in Superman and Action Comics, Superman will face Lobo, Brainiac, and the Green Lanterns. Oh, we have a 6-issue crossover story called House of Brainiac that will see the Zarnians who will attack Earth. Hey Tevia, thank you so much for coming to the stream. Good to see you here. What are some of your thoughts on these new developments over in Dawn of DC? What do you think about the new Trinity of Evil with Zurin R? In fact, we're going to talk a little bit more about that over in this next paragraph. In December's Batman issue 140 called Mind Bomb, the Dark Knight will not only face his most brutal plan yet with the Joker, but Zurinar will finally reveal his master plan in his relentless pursuit of eradicating all crime. Oh, Zurinar has a master plan involving eradicating all crime. That sounds like a really dark and biting way for Batman to kind of culminate over with all these really fascinating plot threads. Very excited to see what future issues of Batman have in store for Zurinar. DC teased throughout the spring the Dark Prison storyline will run through Batman 145 to 148. Batman will have to face a terrifying figure from his past in order to survive Zur's onslaught. If he survives, DC promises a new enemy is waiting in the wings, Amanda Waller and the US military. Man, the cohesive way that Chip has been utilizing Zurinar across all these different storylines has just been so staggering. The other day, I was remembering that Batman actually turned on the Zurinar backup personality in order to fight off against Failsafe. And I think that all of the aspects and consequences from that storyline have like really driven the Batman franchise as a whole. I'm very impressed with how Chip Zdarsky has plotted out his entire run, and I can't wait to see what DC's like master plans have in store over for Zurinar too. Very cool. We have some upcoming covers over for Batman 140 and 141. Looks like they're illustrated by the incredibly talented Jorge Jimenez. This cover on Batman 141 over with Zurinar is just so triumphant. It's so dramatic. I know we've looked at it over in a previous stream or even YouTube video here. It looks like this one also has a backup story called Zurinar Triumphant with Chip Zdarsky, Nguyen, and Khalees. Okay. This Trinity of Evil is just beginning of what's coming to DC in 2024. From the start of Dawn of DC in January 2023 through next summer, DC continues to build storylines that will deliver major consequences throughout the DC universe by the end of 2024. Some of these initial Dawn of DC comics are still available at participating retailer shops. Okay, I think we've read just enough of that here. And yeah, once again, very excited at what DC has in store for the rest of Dawn of DC. Man, with the publisher revealing the fact that it's been that Dawn of DC was first revealed in like January of 2023, we're almost coming up on a year in terms of Dawn of DC's publishing. As a whole, I think it's really shaped out incredibly well for the publisher. I think in some capacity, I've been just as excited to check out some of the DC books as I have been in terms of Marvel lately following the relaunch. I think some of these newer series for characters like Green Lantern and The Flash have featured just really strong ideas and really strong story scenarios across the DC universe here. All right, well, I think that is going to go ahead and end our stream for today. I want to thank you for spending your time with me and really diving into the core of DC and Marvel this weekend. Hope you enjoyed our deep dives at what the symbiotes have in store for the future of the Marvel Universe and our deep dive into what DC has planned for the next phases over in Dawn of DC. We'll be back on Tuesday with some really epic DC videos covering the next DC comics. Plus, we'll have some brand new Marvel Comics videos in store for Wednesday. And I think this upcoming weekend, we are actually going to hold our streams over on different days. I actually have some plans in store. Please keep an eye out over on our community posts. I will be updating you. And my plan is, at least at the bare minimum, we're going to go ahead and get one stream in, maybe on Friday afternoon. Thank you so much for coming to check out our stream this Sunday afternoon. Hope you have a great rest of the weekend and appreciate you spending our time with us. Thank you so much, Grace and Red. Have a nice weekend. I'll see you very, very soon.